Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. My name is Emily, and I hope if you are American, you are doing fantastic on this Independence Day weekend. I know things have been really tough in our country lately, but I think even so on this weekend, we can all find something, a little kernel of something that we are still proud of in our country. For instance, I am proud of the fact that our country has always been a proponent of free speech and democracy and isn't always afraid to question what constitutes a free speech and democracy and freedom. I think we also ought to realize that compared to many other countries right now, we are quite lucky. But this video is not about politics, it is about the books I read in the month of June. So I had a really weird reading month in June. I started off really strong. Like most of my reading in this video was done in the first 2 weeks of the month. And mid-month, I just hit the worst reading slump. Well, not the worst, but I hit a pretty bad reading slump. I didn't read for at least a week and a half. So I was doing Make Your Myth Taker, and I did not finish any of the paths I set out to finish. Not the witch one, not the fae one. I kind of stopped partway in my witch path because I just hit a point where I was like, I want to read what I want to read. I could have finished it in the last week or so, but really I just wanted to read this other book that didn't finish up my path, but I was enjoying it. So, yeah, my reading mood just got really weird last month. As it turns out, watching your family's people get put through a real-life dystopia has a real effect on you psychologically. I'm not there, I am not in the middle of the protests going on over there, but I still feel that deep inherited pain. So basically, mid-month, wasn't in much of a mood to read anything, and it just made me fail my readathon, but I still read some pretty good books on the way. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about some books. So first I'm going to talk about the next 5 books in the Scott Pilgrim graphic novel series. I read the first book at the end of May, and then in the first week of June, I just powered through the next 5 books. So Scott Pilgrim is a graphic novel series about a guy named Scott who is out of uni. He's a bit of a loser, and he's in a band, and he's between jobs. And one day he meets a girl called Ramona who he instantly falls in love with. But a condition of dating her is that he has to defeat all of her exes. So a bit of an absurd concept, kind of video game logic-ish, but I had no problem buying into it. It was just really fun to read about. He got XP points for different character development moments. And Scott himself is a very interesting character because you can clearly see what a jerk he can be sometimes, but also he's quite lovable in a dopey sort of way. His relationships with his bandmates is really funny, and also his roommate. And in the last book, his journey as a character really paid off. Also, I just really loved the art style. I will say that one thing about the black and white artwork is that sometimes you can't really tell some of the characters apart. It's kind of difficult. So I contemplated reading it in color, but then my boyfriend told me that there are some jokes in the text that rely on you reading it in black and white. So I read it in black and white, and it turns out, yes, there are jokes that do not come across as well if you read it in color. So yeah, I highly recommend this graphic novel series and read it in black and white. Next up, I read His Majesty's Dragon, which is the first book in Naomi Novik's Temeraire series. I think in the UK it's simply published as Temeraire. This book is basically about the Napoleonic Wars, but with dragons. So because of the presence of dragons, there is now aerial warfare in the Napoleonic Wars. And in England, there is a special aerial corps for dragon riders. Our main character is Captain Lawrence, and he is originally a naval officer, and his ship captures a French ship, and on board that ship is a unique dragon's egg. And when the dragon hatches, he claims Captain Lawrence as his rider. So Captain Lawrence is forced to join the aerial corps. And the aerial corps are just people who are men apart from society. They tend to be kind of looked down upon. But Captain Lawrence also forms a very deep bond with his dragon, whom he names Temeraire. So I enjoyed Uprooted, which is another one of Naomi Novik's novels, which I have read. But I think I enjoyed this, dare I say, more than Uprooted. Like, yes, it's historical fantasy, which I love, alternate historical fantasy. But there was just something so simple and pure about the relationship between a man and his dragon that was just so compelling to me. There was a lot of great world building, and I loved exploring the different types of dragons and how dragons are trained. But ultimately, the story was very simple and pure, and that was all I really needed out of this. Like, this was basically a Regency era how to train your dragon. And of course, there are also some other really colorful characters around, and you get to see sort of the internal politics in the Aerial Corps and how they interact with other arms of the British Army. And there's also an interesting aspect of women being allowed in the Aerial Corps, just because there are certain dragons that only bond with women. But this was a great, wholesome historical fantasy, and I am really looking forward to reading the next book. Next up, I read Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is about a girl called Spensa who lives in a space colony that is constantly under threat by an alien race called the Krell. Spensa's dream is to be a pilot to protect her world, but her father was killed as a traitor when she was very young because he supposedly abandoned his pilot mission. So Spensa bears that stigma of being his daughter. So she's very determined to rise in the ranks and overturn that really shameful aspect of her father's legacy. So reading this book, I was just really impressed at how Sanderson continues to create really well realized worlds just over and over again in almost every one of his books. Like, he thought through all the technology, how this world is structured, and yeah, it's so realistic and believable. But the thing I liked best about this book is how all the characters, even if they seemed flat and two-dimensional at the beginning, they slowly became more well realized and more human as the story went on. Like, even Spensa's bully and this admiral who is really high up and tries to keep Spensa down, even they turn out to be just parts of a flawed system that forces their hand. Actually, they ended up being some of the more interesting characters to me. Spensa was fine, but I sometimes found her hot-headedness a little bit irritating, because she would always have this really bombastic attitude towards other people, and sometimes I really wanted her to just chill. Like, I get that she was in a hard situation and she had to be tough for herself, but man, she just had no tact at all. She was just really pig-headed and dogged, and I got that that helped her in a lot of situations, and I appreciated that at times, but there are other moments where I felt it wasn't appropriate and kind of took away from that character for me. But definitely the end took a very sort of Ender's Game type twist, which I guess this was marketed as a less problematic Ender's Game. But yeah, they set up a different set of problems for us for the next book, so I'm really looking forward to reading that. And the last book I completed in the month of June was A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. This is the final book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. So I said in previous videos that the first book was pretty good. The second book I didn't enjoy as much because it didn't have that same narrative tension, but it was building up to a lot of stuff in this book, and it turns out it was, because this book was amazing. The second book had actually introduced us to a lot of parts of this world. So it's Kel's Red London world, and we got to see a lot more of that. And we got to build a lot more on that world. We got to see these really interesting places that exist. So that was really rewarding. But what I think I appreciated most about this book was that we got to meet and experience a lot of other characters outside of just Kel and Lila. I think in the first couple books, I think we were a bit limited because we often just had the perspectives of Lila and Kel and sometimes Rye, but we got to be in the heads of other characters like Rye's father and his mother. We got a lot from Alucard. Even the main antagonist, we got to be in his mind as well. So of course there was an amazing magical battle at the end. Really, the magic system in this world at its best. So overall, I do really recommend this series. There's just great world building and ultimately some really great characters in it. I'm really glad that I finished this trilogy. It was very satisfying. So that's it pretty much for my June wrap-up. I know that was probably pretty brief compared to my other wrap-ups. It's just that I had a whole graphic novel series and I just had a slump in the middle of the month, so I don't have that much to talk about. Also, my camera is dying, so I am rushing a bit. But let me know down below what books you read in June, which ones you enjoyed. Remember to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for getting me past 1,500 subscribers. Also, please ask me some questions on my different platforms for a Q&A video. I'm probably gonna do one soon. And while you're at it, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads, and I will see you in my next video.